The table had been set since 11 in the morning, the soft yellow light of the dining room catching. The edges of the silverware she had polished the night before. Emily stepped back and looked at everything one more time. 2 plates, 2 cloth napkins folded exactly the way her daughter liked, and the tall glass her son always asked for, even if he never finished his drink. The flowers in the center were fresh, white lilies mixed with small pink roses. She knew the roses were unnecessary, but she had added them anyway. Today felt special, and she wanted everything to be perfect. It wasn't a big birthday, not one of those milestone numbers people celebrated with parties or balloons or cakes shaped like numbers. It was simple, just another year, but to her it meant everything. Because this year she had promised herself she wouldn't spend it alone. She had confirmed with both of them yesterday evening. Her daughter had replied with a quick, "Yes, Mom, of course. I'll be there." And her son had said, "Yeah, I'll drop by around noon." Neither message had been long, but at least they had answered. At least they had agreed. So she cooked their favorite meal, the kind she used to make every Sunday when they were little, the slow-roasted chicken with herbs, mashed potatoes, and the salad tossed just the way her daughter always insisted on. She even baked a small lemon cake because her son always said, "Mom, lemon cake tastes like home." She kept checking the food, adjusting the table, walking from one end of the house to the other, counting the hours. At 11:30, she opened the blind so the sunlight could spill into the room. By noon, she sat down on the sofa and waited. Every sound from the street made her look toward the door. Every car that slowed down made her heart beat faster for a moment. But noon passed. Then 1, then 2, then 5. Not a single knock on the door. Not a single "I'm on the way." Not even a "Sorry, Mom." Nothing. Just silence sitting heavy around her, pressing against her chest like a weight she couldn't push off. She walked back into the dining room and saw the food still untouched, the candle still unlit. She pressed her hand to her lips as her eyes filled with tears. She tried to blink away. But they came anyway, slow at first, then faster, falling down her cheeks, as she stood there in the middle of her perfectly prepared dining room with 2 plates, set for people who didn't come. She sat down at the table and looked at the seat across from her. Memories flooded back, their little legs dangling from chairs too tall for them, their tiny fingers reaching for food, their laughter echoing off the walls. For a moment she could almost hear it again, and that made everything hurt more. The food had gone cold by the time she finally stood up. She put everything away quietly, carefully, like she didn't want the dishes to know how disappointed she was. When she opened the fridge, the cold air rushed against her face, and she let out a shaky breath. She wrapped the cake tightly, even though she knew no one would eat it. Then she washed her hands and wiped the counter clean. It was 8:17 p.m. when she finally sat down on the couch again. This time she didn't wait. She didn't look at her phone. She didn't hope for anything. She just stared at the wall. Hours passed like minutes. The house felt too still, too empty, too silent. She pulled her blanket closer around her shoulders, the fabric soft against her cheek, and closed her eyes, until she heard the door. It wasn't a gentle knock. It was the rushed, careless bang her son always made when he was in a hurry. She didn't move. She heard keys jangling, laughter outside, not the warm kind, but the kind that came from people who knew they didn't have consequences waiting for them. Then the door opened. "Mom?" her son called, his voice casual, almost bored. "Mom, you awake?" her daughter added, sounding annoyed, as if she was the one who had been waiting all day. Emily sat up slowly. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. Something inside her had gone still, quiet like deep water. Her son walked in first, smelling faintly of cologne and someone else's perfume. Her daughter followed, tapping her nails against her phone screen as she typed. "Hey, Mom," her son said. "Sorry we didn't come earlier. Something came up." Emily didn't ask what. She didn't say it's okay. She didn't ask them to sit or eat or talk. Her daughter rolled her eyes like she expected a lecture. "Yeah, we had this thing with friends. You know how it is." Her son stepped forward slightly, glancing at her hands. "Mom, actually, we came because we kind of need something." There it was. Not an apology, not a hug, not even a happy birthday. Just need. "Always need," he continued. "I need like 300. Rent's due tomorrow." Her daughter chimed in. "And I need help with my phone bill. Just this month. I'll pay you back, I swear." Emily looked at them both, studying their faces. their impatience, their assumption that she would always say yes, the way they took her presence for granted, like she was a vending machine they could walk up to whenever their pockets felt light. She didn't say a word. Instead, she stood up, walked past them, opened the small drawer in the hallway, took out the envelope, not the one with money, the one with the ticket. She walked back and placed the envelope on the table. "What's that?" her daughter asked, frowning. Emily looked at them, really looked at them, for the first time in years. "My one-way ticket," she said. They froze. "To where?" her son asked. "Somewhere," she replied softly. "That isn't here." They stared at her like she was speaking another language. For the first time, they looked scared. "Mom, what do you mean?" her daughter whispered. Emily smiled, not out of joy, but out of release. "A long overdue release? I waited for you," she continued, "but you didn't come." Her children exchanged glances, but this time they didn't have excuses that fit. Not ones that mattered. "I'm leaving tomorrow morning," Emily said. "I don't know for how long. I don't know if I'm coming back. I just know I can't stay here anymore." Her son took a step forward. "Mom, don't be dramatic." She lifted her hand. "Don't," she said quietly. The single word made him freeze. Her daughter spoke next. "Is this because of today?" "Mom, we told you." "Yes," Emily said. "It's because of today." And every day before it. The silence after that was heavier than anything she had carried alone. They didn't know what to say. For the first time, they didn't have anything to ask for. And she realized something. Maybe they never would have understood. Unless she finally walked away. She picked up her coat, folded it over her arm, and turned toward her room. "I'll leave early," she said without turning back. "You don't have to come." Then she walked away, leaving them standing in the living room, stunned and silent. And for the first time in years, she felt free. Emily closed the bedroom door gently, not because she feared waking anyone, her children weren't staying the night, but because silence felt sacred right now. She leaned against the door for a moment, listening to the quiet. The house that once held birthdays, laughter, holidays, school mornings, and sleepy good nights now felt like an empty museum of a life she had already lived. She looked around her room. There wasn't much to pack. She had already decided what mattered. Earlier that afternoon, before the disappointment settled in, she had taken out a small suitcase from under her bed, just to check if it was still sturdy enough. She told herself it was only just in case. But deep inside, she knew she had been preparing for this day long before it came. Her hands moved slowly over her dresser, tracing the dust-free surface she cleaned every Saturday out of habit. The framed photo of her kids at ages 7 and 10 sat near the edge. They were smiling then, big, wide grins that reached their eyes. Their arms were around each other, and Emily remembered how cold the wind had been that day. They had insisted they weren't cold, insisting they were big kids and didn't need jackets. She remembered laughing as she wrapped her scarf around them anyway. She picked up the photo frame and sat on the edge of her bed. The bedsheets rustled softly beneath her. She held the frame close, studying the faces staring back at her. How did things change so much? How did the warmth in that moment evaporate into the careless indifference she saw tonight? A tear slid down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it. She let it fall freely, like a quiet goodbye to the version of motherhood she had believed would stay forever. Her phone buzzed suddenly on her nightstand. She looked at the screen. One missed call from her son. 2 unread messages from her daughter. She didn't open them. She turned the phone face down. For the first time, she didn't rush to be available. She didn't run to soothe, to rescue, to stretch herself paper thin just to keep the peace. Tonight, she sat on her bed with her suitcase half open, and her future finally looking back at her. She placed the frame down gently and stood up. There was still packing to do. She pulled open her closet and began choosing clothes. Not the comfortable mom clothes she wore at home, but the ones she had tucked away because they felt too nice for daily use. She folded them neatly, placing them in the suitcase. She added the book she never had time to finish, the soft shawl her sister had gifted her years ago, and the journal she had written in only once, promising herself she'd fill the rest someday. Someday had finally come. As she zipped the suitcase halfway, she paused. She glanced around the room, letting her eyes linger on everything she was leaving behind: the wooden headboard her late husband had built, the rug her children had spilled juice on when they were toddlers, the nightstand with a burn mark from a candle she had once forgotten to blow out, So many memories, some beautiful, some painful, all of them tied to a life she had lived too long in the shadows of other people's needs. Her throat tightened. She sat down again and rested her palms over her knees, breathing deeply. She thought about tomorrow, about the unknown waiting outside this house. She was scared, but the fear was different this time. It wasn't the fear of change. It was the fear of never changing. Outside her room, she could hear her children murmuring to each other. Their voices were low, tense, confused. She imagined their expressions, the awkward guilt on their faces, the shock still settling like dust in the air. She didn't move. She didn't join them. Instead, she lay down slowly on her bed, pulling the blanket up to her chest. Her suitcase remained open on the floor, half packed, half waiting, just like her heart had been for years. She closed her eyes. She didn't sleep right away. Her mind replayed every moment of the day, every expectation and every heartbreak. But somewhere between her thoughts, something shifted, something softened. Eventually, sleep came, not peaceful, but deep. The kind of exhaustion that happens when someone has carried too much for too long. When she opened her eyes again, the room was touched with the early hint of morning, gray light, entering softly through the curtains. The world outside was quiet, as if waiting for her to take her next step. She sat up slowly. Her heart felt heavy but steady. She looked at her suitcase. She stood. She placed the last shirt inside, the toothbrush, the charger, the passport she hadn't touched in years. Then she zipped it shut. When she opened her bedroom door, the house felt different, not because anything had changed, but because she had. Her children were asleep on the living room couch, both curled awkwardly as if they had intended to wait for her but couldn't stay awake. Her son's arm was thrown over his face. Her daughter's phone was still in her hand. The screen dimmed. Emily stood there quietly, watching them. She felt love, deep, unconditional, but also a truth she could no longer ignore. She couldn't stay. She walked past them softly, careful not to wake them. She placed a small note on the kitchen counter. Not an apology, not a plea, not even an explanation. Just a simple line, "I love you. But I need to love myself too." She grabbed her keys, opened the door, and stepped into the morning air. The sky was pale blue, promising a day she had never lived before. She walked toward the taxi she had booked last night, her suitcase rolling behind her on the quiet pavement. For the first time in her life, she wasn't walking toward someone, she was walking toward herself. The taxi driver stepped out when he saw her coming down the walkway with her suitcase. He was an older man with kind eyes, the kind of face that made strangers feel safe without knowing why. He lifted the suitcase gently and placed it in the trunk as Emily stood there for a moment, looking back at her house. It looked smaller today, like a place that had held too many memories, but not enough love in the recent years. She remembered painting the porch light with her husband before he passed, remembered sitting on the front steps watching her kids ride their bikes, remembered each winter, morning sweeping snow off the walkway so the kids wouldn't slip. Every corner whispered something from her past. But the house no longer felt like home. It felt like a place she had stayed in because she didn't know where else to go. "You ready, ma'am?" the driver asked kindly. Emily nodded slowly. "Yes, I think I am." She opened the back door of the taxi and slid inside. The seat was cold against her legs, and for a second she felt a pang in her chest, a small voice asking if she was doing the right thing. But then she looked at her hands, the same hands that had cooked, cleaned, comforted, worked, held, healed, and given everything she had. She owed herself this moment. The taxi pulled away from the curb. The house grew smaller in the rearview mirror until it became just another shape among the neighborhood rooftops. She exhaled, long, slow, steady. The driver glanced at her through the mirror. "Early flight?" "Very early," she said softly. "You traveling alone?" She hesitated for a breath, then nodded. "Yes, for the first time in a very long time." He smiled gently. "Sometimes that's the best way." Emily didn't reply, but his words settled inside her like a warm stone. As the taxi drove through the still sleeping streets, she watched the world wake up in soft pieces. A jogger stretching on a corner, a bakery owner unlocking his shop, a woman walking her dog with sleepy eyes. Everyone had somewhere to be. Everyone was starting something this morning. So was she. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't need to check to know who it was. Her kids. Or one of them, or both. She didn't reach for it. She kept her eyes on the window instead. The airport came into view, a wide stretch of glass, and metal glowing under the early sunrise. People were rushing in and out with luggage, half awake, half excited. For a moment, Emily felt out of place. Everyone seemed to be going somewhere with purpose. She was going somewhere with pain, hope, and uncertainty all tied together. The taxi slowed to a stop. The driver stepped out, grabbed her suitcase, and placed it on the curb. "You take care of yourself," he said kindly. She offered him a grateful smile. "I will." And she meant it in a way she never had before. Inside the airport, the world felt louder, rolling suitcases, announcements echoing overhead, children laughing and crying, the smell of coffee drifting through the air. It was overwhelming, but strangely comforting too. Everyone was moving, living, breathing, choosing something new with every step. Emily walked up to the check-in counter and handed over her ticket. The woman behind the desk smiled politely. "Traveling one way?" she asked, glancing at the screen. "Yes," Emily said simply. "Good for you," the woman whispered, almost like a secret blessing, before she handed back the passport. Emily felt her throat tighten. "Good for you." 3 small words that felt like the wind beneath her feet. She walked through security, slipping off her shoes, placing her bag on the conveyor belt. She moved through the motions quietly, like she had done this many times before, but she hadn't. Not alone. Not like this. When she reached her gate, she found a seat near the window. Outside, planes were preparing for the sky, engines humming like promises. She rested her suitcase beside her and finally allowed herself to breathe deeply. Then she remembered the note she left. "I love you, but I need to love myself too." She wondered how her children had reacted when they woke up. If they had cried, if they had argued with each other, if they had finally realized something she had been trying to teach them without ever speaking it aloud. Love without respect isn't love. Love without effort isn't love. Love without action is just expectation. She didn't hate them. She couldn't. They were her children. She loved them fiercely, painfully, endlessly. But love wasn't enough when it only flowed in one direction. Her phone buzzed again, and again, and again. Finally, she picked it up, not to respond, but to read. "Mom, please answer. Mom, where are you? Mom, we're sorry. We didn't know it meant that much. Please come home so we can talk." "Mom?" Her eyes filled with tears, not the heavy heartbroken kind from yesterday, but the soft healing kind, the tears of someone who had finally chosen herself. She typed one message back. "I'm okay. I need some time. I'll talk to you when I'm ready." She hit send. She didn't wait for their replies. She placed the phone in her bag. When the boarding announcement echoed through the speakers, she stood up slowly. Her legs felt steady. Her heart felt light. Her past felt behind her. She walked toward the jet bridge, each step a declaration of a new chapter. For the first time in her life, she wasn't leaving because she was hurt. She was leaving because she deserved more than the life she had been given. And as she stepped onto the plane, the airplane cabin was cool and dim, lit only by the soft blue lights running along the ceiling. Emily found her seat near the window and placed her bag under the seat in front of her. The woman beside her gave a polite smile before returning to her magazine. The engines hummed gently beneath her feet, vibrating through the floor like a heartbeat. Emily buckled her seatbelt and placed her hands on her lap. Her fingers trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of everything she had just walked away from. She leaned her head back against the seat as the flight attendants moved through the aisle, checking latches and seatbelts, welcoming passengers with practiced warmth. When the plane began to push away from the gate, something inside her shifted. A feeling she hadn't felt in years. Freedom, raw and unfamiliar, almost frightening in its intensity. She looked out the window. The sun was rising higher now, brushing the edges of the clouds with gold. The runway stretched long and straight before them. She felt her breath catch as the plane slowed, then paused, gathering strength. And then it surged forward, faster, faster, faster. Her heart raced with it. She gripped the armrest and closed her eyes as the nose of the aircraft lifted. The ground slipped away, shrinking beneath them until the land looked like pieces of a puzzle she no longer belonged to. Emily wasn't afraid anymore. When she opened her eyes again, they were above the clouds, floating in a world she had never touched before. The sky looked endless. She inhaled slowly as tears pricked the corners of her eyes. Not sadness, not regret, release. A flight attendant approached with a tray. Would you like something to drink? Just water, thank you, Emily murmured. The woman nodded and continued. Emily took a small sip, letting the cold water settle in her throat. She looked down at her hands. They were steady now. The trembling had stopped. She pulled the small journal from her bag, the one she had always promised she would write in when she had time. She flipped it open, saw the first page she had written years ago. One day I'll live for myself. Just one day. I hope I get there. Her breath hitched. She gently touched the words with the tip of her finger. How long had she waited to give herself permission to choose her own happiness? She picked up the pen lying inside the cover and wrote beneath it. Today is that day. Her chest loosened. She wrote more, words that flowed out of her like water from a broken dam. She wrote about the empty dining room, the birthday she spent alone, the hurt she had swallowed for too long, and the hope she was finally allowing herself to feel. She didn't hear the announcements. She didn't notice the people chatting around her. For the first time in years, her world shrank to the page in front of her and expanded at the same time. When she finally placed the pen down, she looked out the window again. The clouds below looked soft, almost like waves of white cotton rolling endlessly toward some distant horizon. Emily rested her forehead against the cool glass. She imagined her children waking up, finding her note. She imagined their confusion turning into fear, then worry, then the realization that things couldn't continue the way they had. She didn't want them to feel lost. She didn't want them to panic. But she needed them to understand. Love without appreciation becomes pain, and pain, ignored long enough, becomes distance. And distance, once wide enough, becomes escape. The captain's voice filled the cabin. Announcing the cruising altitude, Emily blinked and sat up straighter. Are you traveling for work? The woman beside her suddenly asked, her tone friendly. Emily smiled softly. No, I'm traveling for myself. That sounds lovely, the woman replied. Not many people do that. Emily looked out the window again. I know, she whispered. She wasn't running away. She wasn't escaping responsibilities. She wasn't punishing anyone. She was choosing a life she had forgotten she could have. Hours passed gently. A movie played on the small screen, though Emily barely watched it. She drifted between thoughts, memories, and the quiet hum of the cabin. When the pilot finally announced their descent, she closed her journal and placed it carefully in her bag. She sat upright, looked out the window, and waited as the plane slowly lowered toward the new city she had chosen. Buildings came into view first, tall, unfamiliar silhouettes rising from the earth. Then roads, then neighborhoods, then cars darting around like tiny sparks of life. A city she had never been to. A city where no one knew her name. A city where she could be anyone she wanted. As the wheels touched down, her heart thudded in her chest. Not in fear, in anticipation. She was here, wherever here was. It was hers now. And when the plane taxied to the gate, she realized something as she unbuckled her seatbelt. For the first time since she was a young woman, Emily felt alive. The moment Emily stepped off the plane, a wave of unfamiliar air washed over her. It smelled different from home, crisper, saltier, tinged with something she couldn't name. People hurried around her, some dragging suitcases, some rushing toward loved ones, others walking with the confidence of routine travelers. But Emily moved differently, slowly, quietly, absorbing everything with the wide eyes of someone stepping into a new world. The airport was larger than the one she had left behind. Giant windows stretched across the walls, allowing sunlight to pour in like warm honey. She paused for a moment, letting the brightness settle into her skin. It felt like a welcome she had never received before. She followed the signs toward baggage claim, the wheels of her suitcase tapping rhythmically against the floor. With every step, her heart grew lighter, not because she knew where she was going next, but because she didn't have to know. For the first time in years, uncertainty wasn't frightening, it was thrilling. When she reached the escalator, she stepped onto it and let it carry her downward. The entire time she stared at the swirling crowd below, families reuniting, couples embracing, friends laughing as they spotted one another. A small ache brushed against her chest. She wondered if her children were reading her message, if they understood, if they felt the emptiness she had felt yesterday. But she didn't let the ache linger. She stepped off the escalator and walked toward the luggage carousel. A few minutes later, her suitcase appeared, and she lifted it off with a soft grunt. She adjusted the handle, pulled it behind her, and followed the signs that led to the exit. Automatic doors slid open as she approached. And then, a rush of warm coastal air brushed against her face. She stopped at the curb, letting the sunlight fully touch her skin. The sky above was bluer than any she had seen in years. The warm breeze carried the faint scent of the ocean mixed with diesel from passing taxis. The distant sound of seagulls echoed somewhere unseen. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the city introduce itself. Where to now? She wondered. She didn't have a hotel booked. She didn't have a detailed plan. She only had her suitcase, her journal, and the quiet determination she had carried onto the flight. A taxi pulled up in front of her. "You need a ride, ma'am?" the driver asked through the open window. Emily hesitated only for a heartbeat. "Yes," she said, "I do." "Where to?" She looked at the bustling streets ahead, the palm trees swaying in the distance, the tall buildings shimmering under the sunlight, the winding roads disappearing between them like open invitations. "Somewhere near the water," she replied. "Anywhere with a view." He nodded. "I know just the place." She got in. The door closed with a soft thud, and the taxi sped away from the airport. Emily leaned her head against the window, watching as the city unfolded around her. Colorful murals covered the sides of buildings. Small cafes lined the sidewalks, each with people sipping coffee or typing on laptops. Cyclists zipped by, weaving between traffic with ease. The world felt alive, vibrant, humming with energy she could almost breathe in. The taxi turned onto a road lined with tall palm trees swaying gently in the breeze. Then suddenly the ocean appeared in the distance, vast, glittering, alive. Emily sucked in a breath. The sight of it cracked something open inside her. She hadn't realized how small her world had become until she saw how endless the horizon was here. "We're almost there," the driver said with a smile. The car slowed down as they approached a quiet stretch of coastline. The buildings here were smaller, older, with charming balconies and pastel colors. He pulled up in front of a small seaside inn with white railings and blue shutters. A wooden sign hung above the entrance, Seabreeze Lodge, swaying gently in the wind. "This place is affordable, clean, and safe," the driver said. "Good people run it." Emily nodded, her voice soft. "Thank you." She paid him, stepped out, and pulled her suitcase toward the entrance. The sound of the ocean was louder now, waves crashing rhythmically in the distance, calling her forward. Inside the lobby, an older woman stood behind the counter, wearing a warm smile and a sweater that looked hand-knitted. "Welcome," she said. "Do you have a reservation?" Emily shook her head. "No, but I was hoping you might have a room available." "We do," the woman said kindly, "and something tells me you need it." Emily exhaled, a small, grateful smile tugging at her lips. "I do." Within minutes, she was handed a key, an actual metal key, not a card, the old-fashioned kind that felt grounding in her palm. She took the elevator to the 3rd floor, walked down a narrow hallway, and stopped at the door marked Room 302. She unlocked it. The moment she stepped inside, her breath caught. A large window faced the ocean, sunlight pouring into the room and painting everything gold. The bed was neatly made with soft, white sheets. A small table sat near the window, with a vase holding a single daisy. She walked straight to the window. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, blue, shimmering, alive. Emily placed her hand on the glass. It felt cool, soothing, promising. She set her suitcase aside and sank onto the bed. The softness wrapped around her, and she let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. For a long moment, she simply sat there, listening to the waves, feeling the sunlight warm her face. And then her phone buzzed. She ignored it. She laid back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in decades, she wasn't waiting for anyone. For the first time in decades, she wasn't rushing, fixing, giving, apologizing. For the first time in decades, she was simply herself, and the world suddenly felt full of possibilities she had never allowed herself to dream of. Emily stepped out of the taxi and onto the quiet street outside, Seabreeze Lodge. The ocean air was sharp and sweet, filling her lungs like a promise. She dragged her suitcase behind her, the wheels clicking rhythmically against the pavement, each step anchoring her in this new chapter. Inside the lobby, the older woman at the counter gave her a warm smile. "Welcome. Do you have a reservation?" Emily shook her head. "No, I just arrived." The woman nodded knowingly. "Then I think we have the perfect room for you." Minutes later, Emily was in her room. She set her suitcase down and approached the large window. The view of the ocean stretched endlessly, sunlight dancing across the waves. She could hear the faint crash of surf against the shore, mingling with the distant calls of seagulls. For the first time in decades, she had nowhere to be and no one to answer to. The realization both thrilled and scared her. She walked to the small table near the window, unpacking only the essentials: her journal, a pen, a change of clothes, and the small photograph of her children she carried everywhere. Emily sank onto the bed and let the soft sheets embrace her. She closed her eyes and listened to the ocean. The sound was meditative, almost healing, like it was washing away years of neglect, disappointment, and loneliness. She pulled out her journal, flipping through the pages of blank lines, waiting for her thoughts. She had avoided writing for years, always too busy, always too distracted. But today she allowed herself to reflect. She wrote slowly at first, each word heavy with emotion. The day she had spent alone, the emptiness of the birthday, the silent realization that she could no longer let others dictate her happiness. With each sentence, a layer of weight lifted from her chest. She realized the freedom she had feared her whole life was finally hers. Hours passed. Emily didn't think about the past. She didn't check her phone. She simply wrote, observed the waves, and allowed herself to feel alive again. By evening, she opened the small balcony door. The wind carried the salty scent of the ocean. The sky was streaked with pink and orange hues as the sun dipped toward the horizon. She leaned against the railing, letting the breeze whip through her hair. For the first time, she understood what it meant to truly live, not for others, not for expectations, not for routine, but for herself. That night, Emily slept deeply. For the first time in years, she didn't wake to check on anyone. She didn't wake to worries. She didn't wake carrying burdens that weren't hers to carry. When she opened her eyes the next morning, the sunlight poured into the room again, painting the walls in gold. She sat up, stretched, and smiled. A day of possibilities awaited her, a day where she could finally define what happiness meant on her own terms. For the first time, Emily felt not only free, but ready. Sarah sank onto the couch, the notebook trembling in her hands. The apartment felt impossibly silent, almost suffocating, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. The glow of the city outside filtered through the curtains, painting the room in muted gold and gray. Every distant car horn, every flicker of streetlight seemed louder than usual, as if the world knew something had shifted inside her. Her mind refused to stop spinning. The words from the phone call, "Your mother didn't tell you everything," echoed, looping over and over in her brain. She had tried to convince herself it was a prank at first, a wrong number, anything. But the certainty, the calm conviction in the voice, it wasn't fake, it was deliberate, and it carried the weight of truth. Sarah let out a shaky breath and opened the notebook her mother had left. The leather cover felt worn and familiar under her fingers, carrying the faint scent of her mother's perfume. She turned the first page slowly, her eyes widening as she read. "If something happens to me..." "Sarah, read this." Her hands trembled as she turned the next page. The handwriting, familiar yet heavy with emotion, seemed to speak directly into her chest. "I'm sorry I lied to you. Your father was not the man you grew up with." Sarah's heart froze. She gripped the notebook tightly, feeling the edges dig into her palms. The apartment seemed to shrink around her, every shadow growing longer, every silence louder. Her father, not her father? The life she had known, the family she had believed in, everything she had trusted, all of it was suddenly thrown into question. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she forced herself to read on. "Your father, the man I loved before your birth, he made dangerous choices. I hid you from him to protect you. I thought I was doing what was best, though I know it may have caused you pain. Now you must know the truth. He is alive. He wants to meet you. But you must be careful. Not everyone from the past has good intentions." Sarah's thoughts raced uncontrollably. Her mother had sacrificed everything to protect her? Had she been raising her with a shadow looming over them both? A danger Sarah had never even imagined? Her emotions collided in her chest. Anger, confusion, fear, curiosity. How could her mother keep something so monumental hidden? But at the same time, the compassion she felt for her mother, the understanding of her sacrifices, softened the edge of her anger. She closed her eyes, pressing the notebook to her chest, and took a deep breath. She could feel her pulse pounding, her mind whirling. The world she thought she knew had vanished, and in its place lay a path she had never imagined walking, one, toward her real father, toward the hidden truths of her mother's past, toward a future entirely unknown. Sarah opened her eyes again and read the last page. Trust yourself. You are stronger than you know. The truth is frightening, but it is also freeing. I love you, Sarah, always. Her tears fell freely now. For the first time, she whispered aloud, I will find him. I will know the truth. I have to. She didn't yet know where to start. She didn't know if her father was safe, or welcoming, or even aware of her existence. But she knew one thing. She could no longer remain passive, no longer be confined by the life her mother had built in shadows. She had to act. Sarah spent the next hours gathering her thoughts, making lists, writing every question she needed answers to. She mapped possible leads, traced timelines from the clues her mother had provided, and imagined what her father might look like, what his voice might sound like, what his life might be now. The city outside grew darker as night fell, lights flickering in rhythm with her heartbeat. The room, which had felt suffocating at first, now felt alive with potential. Fear was still there, crawling along the edges of her consciousness, but it was mingled with a fierce, growing determination. And in the quiet of that apartment, with only the notebook and her thoughts for company, Sarah realized something profound. This was the first time in her life. She was stepping into the unknown entirely on her own. Her mother's words, her father's shadowed existence, the secrets she had never known. All of it was part of the story she was about to claim as her own. She closed the notebook gently, pressed it to her chest one last time, and whispered into the stillness, I am ready. And at that moment, in the quiet city night, Sarah's journey truly began. A journey that would take her to unknown cities, into hidden truths, and ultimately to the man who was not just a father, but the missing piece of her life. Sarah didn't sleep that night. The apartment felt smaller, almost oppressive, yet alive with anticipation. The city outside murmured with its usual night sounds, cars passing, distant music from a bar, the occasional bark of a dog. But inside, her thoughts were deafening. Every shadow, every flicker of light through the curtains seemed to whisper secrets, urging her forward. By early morning, she had a plan. She pulled the notebook close, rereading the details her mother had left, approximate locations, names of people who might know her father, and hints about the circumstances that forced her mother to hide the truth. Every word felt like a breadcrumb leading her out of the life she had always known and into the life she was about to discover. She packed a small bag, notebook, wallet, phone, charger, a few essentials. She didn't take much. She didn't need much. She needed clarity, courage, and determination, and those weren't items she could pack. The streets were quiet as she left the apartment. The city was just waking up. The first buses rolled by. A street vendor opened his shutter, and a jogger ran past her, headphones in. Oblivious to the storm in her mind, Sarah pulled her jacket tighter around her. She had traveled alone before, but this journey was different. She was walking not to explore a new city or a new job, but to uncover a life she had never known, to meet a man she had never seen, and to confront a past that had been kept from her. Her first stop was the local archives. Her mother's notes had mentioned a lawyer who had handled the estate of a man she believed was her father's closest friend. If the clues were correct, this lawyer might hold records, letters, property documents, anything that could point her in the right direction. Inside the archives, the air smelled of old paper, leather, and dust. The quiet was sacred, punctuated only by the occasional shuffle of papers or the murmur of researchers. Sarah moved with purpose, tracing her fingers over the rows of shelves like a map, until she found the section her mother had indicated. She sifted through boxes, reading names and dates aloud softly to herself. Hours passed. Sunlight began to filter through the high windows, dust motes dancing in the golden shafts. Sarah found nothing concrete at first, just fragments, addresses, partial letters, names that didn't immediately connect. But then, tucked between two old envelopes, she found a folded letter, yellowed with age. The handwriting was unmistakable. It wasn't her mother's. It was a man's, deliberate and firm. She opened it carefully, her breath caught between anticipation and fear. To whomever finds this, it began. If you are reading this, it means my past has reached the present. I have lived my life in shadows, hoping to protect the one I left behind. My daughter, I hope one day you find this letter. You deserve to know who you are, and that the mistakes I made do not define you. I am alive. I am here. If you wish to know me, follow the signs I have left, and you will find me. Sarah's hand shook. Her pulse raced. She read the letter again, slower this time, letting each word sink in. The handwriting felt alive, like the man himself had reached through time and space to speak directly to her. She folded the letter carefully, placing it in her notebook. She realized then that she had a choice: to continue her ordinary life, ignoring the past, or to step fully into the unknown and meet the father she had never known. Her heart leapt, not with fear this time, but with determination. She would not let the years of secrecy and lies define her. She would seek the truth. She would meet him. The city outside seemed brighter now, as though it had been waiting for her to decide. She stepped out of the archives, the letter burning a quiet warmth in her bag. The journey ahead was uncertain, dangerous even. But for the first time in her life, she felt a clarity she had never known. Sarah walked down the street with her head held high. Every step carried the weight of the past and the hope of the future. Every breath was a declaration. She was ready. And somewhere ahead, in a life she had never touched, a man waited. Her father. The morning sun had barely crested over the horizon when Sarah stepped onto the quiet streets of the city. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of asphalt warmed by the early rays of sunlight, mixed with the sweet aroma of bakery bread wafting from a corner cafe. Her steps were purposeful, measured, yet hesitant. Each footfall against the cracked pavement echoed the conflict within her: fear, curiosity, anger, hope, all tangled together in a knot she couldn't untangle. The letter from the archives and the photographs she had found in the antique shop burned in her mind. Her father was alive, somewhere, waiting for her, leaving these carefully crafted breadcrumbs. The thought made her chest tighten and her stomach flutter. She had always imagined meeting him one day in dreams, vague and hazy, as if her subconscious was afraid to reveal the truth. Now reality was pushing forward, and there was no escaping it. Her first stop was the location marked clearly on the faded map. The street was narrow, lined with old brick buildings with ivy crawling over the walls, balconies draped with laundry, and little cafes with the smell of freshly ground coffee drifting into the air. Children ran past her, laughter echoing down the alleyways, their innocence a sharp contrast to the storm of secrets she carried. Sarah paused at a street corner and looked at the number on the map. Her destination was a small, unassuming bookstore wedged between two aging apartments. Its wooden sign, chipped and faded, read "Hidden Chapters." Dust obscured the display window, and the books inside seemed to lean on one another in disarray. The scene felt like it had been frozen in time. She pushed the door open. A small bell jingled overhead. The inside smelled of old paper, polished wood, and a faint hint of lavender, comforting and haunting at once. Shelves overflowed with books of all sizes, and the dim light cast a warm glow across the room, making the dust particles visible in golden streaks. Behind the counter, an elderly woman emerged. Her hair was silver and tied in a loose bun, her eyes sharp yet soft, as if they had seen the secrets of generations pass through this shop. "You must be Sarah," she said, almost as if she had been expecting her. Her voice carried the calm authority of someone who had witnessed countless searches for truth, hope, and closure. Sarah hesitated, her throat tight. "Yes, I'm looking for someone. My father. My mother said he might have left something here years ago." The woman's eyes softened. "I thought you'd come one day. Follow me." Sarah followed her into a narrow hallway that opened into a back room filled with stacks of papers, envelopes, photographs, and letters. The walls were lined with old filing cabinets and shelves sagging under the weight of decades of memory. Each step she took felt like stepping deeper into the past, into a world she had never known but had always been a part of. The woman pulled out a wooden box from a high shelf, its surface scratched and worn from years of handling. She handed it to Sarah with reverence. "Everything your father left for you is here. Take your time. Look carefully. Listen to your instincts." With trembling hands, Sarah opened the box. Inside were photographs, some black and white, some color-tinted, showing a man with kind eyes, strong hands, and a smile that seemed impossibly familiar yet foreign. Letters addressed to her mother, maps of locations in the city, and finally, a folded note, written in the same handwriting she had seen before. She unfolded it carefully. Her breath caught as she read, "Sarah, if you are reading this, it means you are ready. Follow the map. It will lead you to me. Trust yourself, and do not be afraid. I have waited a long time for this day." Tears pricked her eyes. Her father, her real father, had anticipated this moment, leaving her a trail, guiding her through the labyrinth of her own past. The weight of decades of secrecy pressed on her, but beneath it was a strange warmth, a fragile hope. Sarah folded the letter, placing it carefully in her notebook. She took a deep breath, letting the aroma of old books and waxed wood fill her lungs. For the first time, the city felt different. Streets that had seemed ordinary now appeared like paths paved with possibility, alive with secrets waiting to be uncovered. Following the map, she traced every street, turned every corner, and passed hidden alleyways, quiet parks, and long-forgotten neighborhoods. Each location seemed chosen to test her, to prepare her for the truth she was about to face. The city had transformed from familiar to mysterious, every brick and cobblestone a keeper of stories she had never heard. Her journey led her to a small pier overlooking the river. Sunlight danced across the water, casting sparkling reflections that seemed almost magical. The map indicated this was the first major waypoint. Her pulse quickened. The pier was deserted except for a few seagulls hovering above, and the occasional fishing boat rocking. Gently in the current, under a weathered bench, she spotted an envelope. Her hands shook as she picked it up, brushing off the dust. Inside were more photographs of her father, some from decades ago, smiling beside her mother, others more recent. A note folded neatly read, "I cannot meet you here. You must follow the path. The next location will bring you closer. Trust your instincts. Do not rush. The truth takes patience." Sarah's chest tightened. Every step she had taken so far, every choice she had made, had led her here. The trail her father had left wasn't just a path. It was a test, a bridge across time and secrecy, meant to prepare her for the moment they would finally meet. The city stretched out before her. Sunlight glinted off the water. Birds cried overhead, and the distant hum of the streets reminded her that life continued, even as hers was transforming. She folded the note and slipped it into her bag. With a deep breath, Sarah stepped off the pier and onto the cobblestone street beyond. Her heart raced not with fear but with determination. She was no longer just a daughter searching for answers. She was a seeker, walking toward truths that would redefine her life. Every alleyway, every park, every street corner she passed now held the promise of discovery. The journey had only begun, and somewhere, just beyond the horizon, was a man who was more than a stranger. He was her father. The city felt alive in a way Sarah had never noticed before. Every shadow, every distant hum of traffic, every flicker of sunlight on the pavement seemed charged with meaning. The map she carried in her hands was no longer just paper. It was a lifeline, a connection to the father she had never met, to the life that had been kept from her. She followed the directions meticulously. The streets narrowed, winding through neighborhoods she had never ventured into before. Old buildings with peeling paint and ivy crawling. Over brick walls whispered history at every corner. The smell of freshly baked bread from a nearby bakery mingled with the faint scent of rain lingering in the air. Children played tag in alleys, their laughter echoing like a soundtrack of life continuing around her. While Sarah moved with purpose, her mind focused entirely on the path ahead. The map led her to a small, forgotten park tucked between two aging apartment buildings. A fountain, dry and covered with moss, stood at the center. The benches around it were weathered, the paint chipped. She checked the map again. The mark indicated the north end of the park. There, half hidden beneath a bench, was a small envelope. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. Inside were photographs, some decades old, showing a man who looked impossibly familiar, smiling beside her mother in moments frozen in time. Other photographs were more recent, capturing a man in midlife. His eyes kind, his posture relaxed, his smile gentle yet reserved. A folded note accompanied the photographs. "You are closer now. The next location will bring you closer still. Trust your instincts. Be patient. Every step has been measured to prepare you. Do not rush. The truth reveals itself in its own time." Sarah pressed the envelope to her chest. Each word seemed deliberate, a guide left specifically for her. Her father had been preparing for this day for decades, leaving a careful trail to ensure she could handle what awaited. The weight of secrecy, the years of hidden truths, pressed upon her shoulders, but beneath it a spark of hope ignited. She tucked the note into her bag and surveyed her surroundings. The park was quiet, the city waking around her. Sunlight dappled the ground through the skeletal branches of the old trees. Sarah felt a strange calm amid the anticipation, a sense that this path she had chosen was right. She was no longer passive in her own life. She was an active seeker, moving toward answers she had yearned for unknowingly. The next clue led her to a quiet street lined with antique shops and cafes. One of the shop windows displayed a collection of old globes and maps. The brass handles on the cabinets gleamed under the morning sun. As she approached, she noticed a small handwritten note taped to the window. "Do not be afraid. You are ready. Continue. The next location holds more than just a clue. It holds the past you seek." Sarah's heart raced. Her father's trail wasn't just about finding him. It was about understanding the life she had been denied, the truths that had shaped her mother's choices, and the consequences of decisions made decades ago. Every clue brought her closer, not just to him, but to the person she had always been beneath the weight of secrecy. She walked into the narrow alley indicated on the map. The buildings loomed above her, casting long shadows on the cobblestones. Every creak of a door, every rustle of paper in the wind, seemed amplified, echoing in her chest. The alley ended at a small, inconspicuous door. Sarah paused. The map confirmed this was the next location. She pushed the door open. Inside was a room filled with shelves of old books, papers, and letters. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the window. At the center was a wooden table, and on it lay a single envelope addressed to her. Hands shaking, she picked it up and opened it. Inside was a letter from her father, written in the same deliberate, careful handwriting that had guided her for so long. "Sarah, you have done well to come this far. Each step you have taken proves your courage. The next location is where you will finally find me. Be patient, be careful, and trust yourself. The truth awaits you, as does I." Tears filled Sarah's eyes. The journey had been long, and yet the hardest part still lay ahead. She folded the letter carefully, her fingers trembling, and tucked it safely in her bag. The city outside seemed to pulse with life, every street and alleyway now part of her journey. She stepped back into the morning light, determination blazing in her chest. Every footstep carried her closer, every breath steeled her resolve. The path her father had laid for her was winding, uncertain, and filled with the echoes of the past, but she was ready. She would meet him. She would uncover the truth, and she would finally understand the life that had been hidden from her for so long. The sun hung low in the late afternoon sky, casting golden streaks across the cobblestone streets. Sarah walked briskly, the envelope from the last clue clutched tightly in her hand, her heart thundering in her chest. Every step brought a mix of anticipation, fear, and longing, a cocktail of emotions she had never felt so intensely in her life. The map led her to a quiet street on the outskirts of the city, where the buildings were older, their brick walls softened by ivy and the passage of time. It was a street that seemed forgotten by most, yet alive with whispers of history. The address indicated an old warehouse, converted long ago into a private library and study. The front door was massive, wooden, and slightly worn, the brass handle gleaming faintly in the sunlight. Sarah paused. Her breath caught. Was she ready? Could she face the man who had been a stranger all her life, but was also, in a way, the missing piece of her existence? Her fingers tightened around the envelope, and she drew a deep breath, steadying herself. She pushed the door open, and it creaked softly. Inside, sunlight streamed through high windows, dust motes floating like tiny stars suspended in the air. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books, letters, and artifacts from decades past. At the far end of the room, a man stood, looking out the window. He was tall, with hair touched by gray, and a posture that exuded both strength and gentleness. The sunlight caught his profile, and for a moment, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. He turned slowly, and their eyes met. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Sarah saw in his eyes a mixture of hope, regret, and longing, the same emotions she had felt all her life without knowing. "Why, Sarah," he said softly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I've been waiting for you. She took a tentative step forward. You're my father? Her voice trembled, barely above a whisper. He nodded. Yes, I am. And I know this is overwhelming. I've spent decades trying to find the right way to tell you, to protect you, to guide you to this moment. And now, here you are. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, but she forced herself to keep standing. Why? Why did you hide from me? Why did Mom never tell me? He sighed, his eyes flickering with pain. Your mother made the choice to protect you, just as I did. I was involved in things that could have been dangerous for you. I couldn't risk your safety. I thought I could stay away and let you live a normal life. But I never stopped thinking of you. Every day I hoped that one day you would understand. Sarah's chest ached with a swirl of emotions, anger at the decades of absence, relief at finally finding him, and an almost dizzying sense of connection to the man she had never known. She wanted to scream, to cry, to hug him, to demand answers, all at once. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her voice breaking. You don't have to say anything, he replied. Just being here is enough. I've waited a long time to see you, to finally meet the daughter I never knew I would lose. And now that you're here, we can begin to share the truth together. He stepped closer, and Sarah instinctively took a step back, overwhelmed. The air between them was thick with decades of untold stories, hidden truths and unspoken emotions. But then, slowly, she felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a sense of belonging she had never known. Come, he said gently. There's much you need to know, but I want you to feel safe first. You are here, and that is all that matters. Sarah nodded, her tears flowing freely now. She followed him to a small table by the window, where sunlight spilled across old maps, photographs, and letters. Every item seemed to tell a story, and she realized that each piece was a fragment of her own life, her father's life, intertwined with hers, waiting for her to discover it. He began to speak carefully, patiently, revealing truths about his past, his choices, and the reasons he had stayed away. Each word was heavy with regret, but also with love and a desire to reconnect. Sarah listened, absorbing every detail, every confession, every fragment of a history that had been hidden from her. Hours passed. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the room. By the time he finished, Sarah felt like she had traveled decades in moments, through fear, anger, longing, and understanding. She had found him, and yet she realized that this was only the beginning. The journey ahead would uncover more secrets, more truths, and ultimately lead to a connection that had been waiting all her life. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady despite the tears. I want to know everything, every secret, every truth. I need to understand. He nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. And you will, Sarah, you will. Together, we will uncover it all. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt whole. The search, the journey, the fear, it had all led to this moment. And as the light faded and evening settled over the city, she knew that her life had changed forever. She was no longer just a daughter searching for answers. She was a part of a story that had begun decades ago, a story that she would now live, breathe, and shape with the man who had been waiting for her all along, her father. The late afternoon sunlight had faded into a soft twilight, painting the city in shades of gold and deep blue. Inside the quiet study, Sarah sat across from her father, the stack of photographs, letters, and maps spread out before them like pieces of a puzzle. Her chest still fluttered from the first meeting, from the overwhelming reality that the man before her, the father she had dreamed about all her life, was finally real. He cleared his throat softly, his gaze distant, as if recalling memories that had been buried for decades. Sarah, before you can fully understand why I stayed away, you need to know the truth about my past, about the choices I made. Sarah leaned in, her heart pounding, bracing herself. Tell me everything, she whispered. He nodded. I was involved in a group that you might consider dangerous. My decisions back then endangered more than just myself. They could have put you in harm's way if I had been seen. That's why I left. I thought it was the only way to keep you safe. Sarah's mind spun. Dangerous, what? What kind of danger? He exhaled slowly. I was caught in a world of secrets, of power struggles, and I made enemies. Your mother knew it, and she begged me to disappear from your life. I wanted to explain, to protect, but the risks were too high. So I stayed away. I watched from afar, leaving clues, leaving a trail, hoping that one day you would be ready to meet me safely. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. She had always imagined the worst, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. And Mom, she protected me all these years? Yes, he said gently. She loved you more than anything. She made sacrifices I could never repay. Every decision, every lie, every hidden truth. It was all to keep you safe. Sarah's hand shook as she reached for a photograph. It was a picture of her father standing beside her mother, smiling in a sunlit garden. I can't believe this is real, she whispered. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. It is real, and now that you are here, we can finally face the truth together. But understand this, our journey doesn't end here. There are more secrets, deeper truths that you need to know. About me, about your mother, and about the world I once tried to protect you from. Sarah swallowed hard, her throat tight. I'm ready, she said, her voice trembling but determined. I need to know everything. No more hiding. He nodded, his eyes glistening. Then you must be prepared. Some truths are painful. Some will challenge everything you thought you knew. But facing them is the only way to truly understand yourself, and to understand me. For hours he spoke. He told her of hidden alliances, of threats that had lingered in the shadows, and of the difficult choices he had made to shield her from danger. Sarah listened, absorbing every detail, every confession. She felt anger, relief, sorrow, and awe all at once. The father she had imagined was now a man of flesh and blood, with flaws and regrets, but also with courage, love, and unwavering care for her. As the evening deepened into night, Sarah realized that the journey that had begun with a map and a series of clues was now a journey of understanding, of reconciliation, and of uncovering truths that would shape her forever. She looked at her father and said softly, I'm grateful for everything, even the pain, even the years of absence. I finally have you. He smiled faintly, a mix of relief and sadness in his expression. And I finally have you, Sarah. Nothing can ever change that. Outside, the city lights flickered to life, shimmering across the quiet streets. Inside, two lives, separated by decades of secrecy, had finally converged. The journey ahead would be challenging, filled with revelations, difficult choices, and confronting the shadows of the past. But for the first time, Sarah felt whole. Together they would face the secrets, the dangers and the truths that had shaped their lives. Together they would reclaim the time lost and forge a bond that could never be broken. For Sarah, the search was over, but the story had only just begun. The night had settled over the city, the streets glowing faintly under the amber light of street lamps. Sarah sat across from her father at the wooden table, her hands resting on the envelope containing the next set of letters and photographs. The room smelled of old paper, polished wood, and faint traces of her father's cologne, a scent she had never known but now felt strangely comforting. Her father leaned back in his chair, his eyes reflecting both sorrow and resolve. There's much you don't know, Sarah. Things I've kept hidden not out of shame, but out of fear for you, for your safety. You must understand, some of the decisions I made, they weren't easy, and some consequences linger even now. Sarah nodded, swallowing hard. I need to know everything, no more half-truths. No more secrets. He sighed, folding his hands on the table. Very well. It begins decades ago, before you were born. He spoke slowly, carefully, painting a picture of a life she had never imagined. Alliances formed in shadows, dangerous figures who demanded loyalty, betrayals that shaped his every decision. He told her of times he had to flee, of moments when even his own safety was uncertain. But amidst the danger, he always carried the thought of her, the daughter he could not yet reveal himself to. Sarah listened, absorbing each word. Her mind swirled with images of her father, navigating a world so different from the quiet, ordinary life she had known. She felt fear for him, admiration for his courage, and a growing anger at the decades of absence, but also a profound understanding of why he had stayed away. Then came the part that shocked her the most. There's someone from my past who still watches us, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Enemies I thought long gone, they know of you now. They might try to interfere, to stop this reunion. That is why I've left clues instead of meeting you openly sooner. I had to ensure your safety before now. Sarah's pulse quickened. Enemies? Are we in danger? Her father nodded gravely. Potentially. That's why your journey to me was guided carefully. Every clue, every location, it was all part of a path to prepare you, to test your resolve and awareness. You are stronger than I ever expected. Sarah, but you must be cautious. The shadows of the past are long, and some are closer than we think. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, but determination burned brighter. I don't care. I've come this far. I will face whatever comes, for you, for me, for the truth. He reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. I knew you would say that. You've inherited the same courage that kept me alive through all those years. And now together we can face these shadows. Sarah glanced down at the letters in her hands. They weren't just words, they were keys to understanding. A life she had never lived, a past she had never known, and a future she now had the power to shape. Every photograph, every folded note, every carefully marked map was a breadcrumb, leading her into the heart of a story. She had been waiting for her entire life. Hours passed as her father recounted tales of survival, courage, and difficult moral choices. He spoke of sacrifices made to protect her mother, of dangers faced in silence, of enemies whose names were whispered like curses in the dark. Sarah listened intently, her emotions a turbulent mix of shock, awe, sorrow, and gratitude. Finally, as the night deepened and the city outside grew quiet, her father looked at her with solemn eyes. Tomorrow you will take the next step. There is a place, an old safe house, there. You will learn even more about the life I led, the dangers I faced, and the secrets that shaped both of us. But know this, it will not be easy. You may feel fear, anger, even betrayal. All of it is part of the truth. Sarah nodded, determination etched on her face. I'm ready, no matter what. I will face it. Her father smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and relief. Then rest now. Tomorrow begins the part of your journey that will reveal the deepest truths. And after that, only then will we understand the full weight of the past and the future we can build together. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp, earth and distant smoke from the city below. Sarah's father handed her a small key attached to a leather cord, worn from years of use. This will take you to the safe house, he said quietly. It's a place I used long ago. There, you will see the truth I've hidden from the world, and from you. Sarah's heart pounded. The key felt heavy in her hand, not because of its weight, but because of the responsibility it symbolized. She had already faced so much, uncovered so many secrets, but something told her that what awaited inside the safe house would change everything. She thought she knew about her father and about herself. The building was tucked away on a deserted street at the edge of the city. From the outside, it looked abandoned, a relic of a forgotten era with crumbling brick and shuttered windows. But Sarah had learned by now that appearances were deceptive. She inserted the key into the lock, turned it carefully, and pushed the door open. Inside, the air was cool and heavy with the scent of old wood and dust. The safe house was small, but meticulously organized. Maps covered the walls, some marked with routes, dates, and cryptic symbols. A desk sat in the center, littered with letters, journals, and photographs. Sarah's eyes widened. Every item was a fragment of a life she had never imagined. Her father stepped beside her, his presence calm yet commanding. Everything here is part of the past I wanted to protect you from. But now you are ready. Look, explore, and try to understand why I stayed away for so long. Sarah moved slowly, almost reverently, touching photographs, unfolding letters, reading the handwritten notes that chronicled danger, sacrifice, and hidden alliances. One photograph made her gasp. It showed her father standing with a man she recognized from the old letters, someone whose name was whispered with caution in the family history. This, she said, pointing. Who is he? Her father's expression darkened. He was once a partner, a friend, and a dangerous man. He betrayed me, forcing me to disappear, to hide. I feared what might happen to you if you were ever involved in their world. Sarah nodded, feeling a mix of fear and fascination. And these maps? These notes? They were my attempt to keep you safe while guiding you. I left clues, breadcrumbs, a path that you could follow safely when the time was right. I hoped you'd have the courage and discernment to understand it. She walked to a journal lying open on the desk. It detailed covert operations, secret meetings, and threats that lingered even decades later. Her father had lived a life of shadows and danger, and now she could see just how carefully he had maneuvered to protect her mother and herself. As she absorbed the details, a sudden sound outside the safe house made her jump, a scraping noise, faint but deliberate. Her father's eyes sharpened. "They know," he said quietly, moving toward the window. "Some of the enemies I thought gone have returned. We need to be ready. But don't be afraid, Sarah. You are not alone." The weight of the revelations pressed down on her. The life her father had lived was far more complex and dangerous than she had imagined. But amid the fear, there was clarity. She now understood why he had stayed away, why her mother had hidden the truth, and why he had left clues to guide her safely. "Everything makes sense now," Sarah whispered. "The letters, the maps, the warnings. It wasn't abandonment. It was protection." Her father nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Exactly. And now together we face the next chapter. You've seen the past. Now it's time to confront the present and the threats that still linger." Outside, the city lights began to flicker as dusk settled over the streets. Inside the safe house, father and daughter stood together, surrounded by the shadows and secrets of decades past. They were ready for whatever came next. Danger, revelation, and ultimately, the truth that would change both their lives forever. Night had fully fallen, and the city below shimmered like a field of scattered stars. The safe house was quiet, but the tension in the air was palpable. Sarah stood near the window, peering out at the shadowed streets, her heart racing. She had absorbed so much already, the hidden life of her father, the dangers he had faced, and the enemies who had forced him into secrecy. But now it felt real. The threat was no longer in history. It was in the present. A faint noise came from the back alley, a scrape against the brick wall, soft but deliberate. Sarah froze. Her father's eyes narrowed as he moved to stand beside her, hand gently on hers. "They've found us sooner than I anticipated," he said quietly, his voice calm but edged with urgency. "Stay behind me. Remember everything I've taught you about caution and awareness." Sarah's pulse thudded in her ears. Fear battled with adrenaline, but she stood firm, trusting the father she had just begun to know. Together, they moved toward the side exit of the safe house, careful not to make a sound. The alley was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of a distant street lamp. Shadows stretched across the walls like ghostly fingers. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall, imposing, and unmistakably dangerous. Sarah's father stepped forward. "Leave now," he commanded. His voice carried authority honed by years of navigating danger. "You do not want to engage with us." The figure laughed softly, a low, menacing sound. "It's too late," the stranger replied. "She's already here, and now you'll answer for the past." Sarah's heart leapt. This was one of the men her father had mentioned. The betrayer. The one who had forced him into hiding all those years ago. Fear surged, but she forced herself to stay composed. Her father reached into his jacket, producing a small, concealed device. "Sarah, stay close. Follow my lead." They moved swiftly, navigating the maze of alleys behind the safe house. Every step was calculated, every movement precise. The city seemed alive with danger, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional shout. Even the wind against the buildings felt like it carried warning. Finally, they reached a hidden door embedded in a brick wall. Her father pressed a small panel beside it, and the door clicked open. Inside was a narrow corridor, leading to a secret chamber filled with supplies, maps, and communication devices. Sarah gasped. How did you even—" Her father smiled faintly, eyes scanning the corridor. "Preparedness is everything. I've lived my life anticipating threats. Now you see why. But this is more than survival. It's about understanding the world I navigated, the risks I took, and the lengths I went to protect you." Inside the chamber, he handed Sarah a small notebook. "This contains the details of their operations, the names, the locations, the connections. Study it carefully. Knowledge is power, and you must be prepared for what comes next." Sarah nodded, determination blazing in her eyes. Fear lingered, but it was tempered by courage. For the first time, she realized that danger was not something to avoid. It was something to face, together, with knowledge and strategy. Hours passed as they pored over the notebook, planning, preparing, and understanding the network of enemies that had shadowed her father's life for decades. Each revelation made Sarah stronger, more aware, and more determined to confront the past. Finally, her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "Tomorrow we move. We confront the threat directly. But remember this, you are not just following a path anymore. You are shaping it. And together, nothing can stop us. Sarah looked out at the city, feeling the weight of history and the immediacy of danger pressing in. She had met her father, uncovered hidden truths, and now faced enemies who still lingered. Fear was present, but so was courage, connection, and the determination to claim the life and truth that had been waiting for her all along. The night stretched on, shadows dancing across the walls, a silent promise that tomorrow would bring revelations, confrontations, and choices that could change everything. The first light of dawn painted the city in muted shades of gray and gold. Sarah's father had planned every detail meticulously, but even the best-laid plans could not erase the tension that gripped her chest. Today, they would confront the very enemy who had haunted his life for decades, the one who had forced him into hiding, and now threatened to destroy everything. They had just begun to rebuild. They approached the designated location, a deserted warehouse on the edge of the industrial district. Its towering silhouette loomed over them, dark and foreboding, the faint hum of distant machinery echoing through the empty streets. Sarah's fingers tightened around the notebook her father had given her, the one containing the enemy's operations, connections, and weaknesses. Knowledge, she reminded herself, was power. "Stay close," her father whispered. "And remember, every step matters. They're clever, ruthless, and unpredictable. But so are we." They slipped inside through a side entrance he had scouted days before. The air was thick with dust, shadows dancing across the walls, and silence broken only by the soft creak of metal underfoot. Sarah's pulse thundered in her ears, but she kept her focus, her senses sharp. Suddenly, figures emerged from the shadows, 3 men, all armed, their faces obscured by masks. Sarah froze for a heartbeat, fear prickling at the edge of her resolve. Her father stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "We don't want violence if it can be avoided. Step aside." The tallest of the men sneered. "You think you can just walk back into this world after disappearing for decades? You've made a mistake, old friend. And she's collateral." Time seemed to slow. Sarah's mind raced, but she remembered the lessons her father had imparted, the strategies, the awareness, the understanding of the enemy. She took a deep breath, centering herself. In a sudden flurry, her father moved with precision, disarming the first assailant with a swift maneuver. Sarah instinctively followed, ducking and weaving as she realized she could act, could fight, could defend. Every move felt like a dance, dangerous, deliberate, and alive. The fight was chaotic yet controlled. Her father's years of experience guided them, while Sarah's courage and quick thinking allowed her to anticipate and respond to threats. Each strike, each maneuver, was a step closer to survival, and to uncovering the truths that had been hidden for so long. Finally, the leader of the group stepped forward, removing his mask. Sarah's eyes widened. She recognized him from the photographs her father had shown. He was the betrayer, the one who had forced her father into exile, the shadow behind decades of secrets. "You should have stayed gone," he hissed, rage flickering in his eyes. "No," her father said steadily. "I protect what matters. And she, my daughter, will never be threatened by you again." A tense standoff followed, the room charged with energy. Then, with a final calculated move, her father incapacitated the leader, securing the room. Sarah exhaled, her body trembling from adrenaline, relief, and the gravity of what had just occurred. The immediate danger was over, but the confrontation had revealed the depth of the enemy's reach and the stakes they were facing. Her father turned to her, eyes filled with pride and concern. "You were brave today, Sarah, stronger than I could have imagined." Tears welled in her eyes. I never want to be afraid again. "Not if I can face it with you." He nodded. "And you won't have to. Together we face the past, the threats, and whatever secrets remain. But know this, our journey is far from over. There are still truths to uncover, and some of them will challenge everything you believe about the past." Sarah looked around the warehouse, the remnants of danger now behind them. The adrenaline still coursed through her veins, but amid it was clarity. She understood her father, his life, his sacrifices, and the world he had protected her from. And she understood herself, her courage, her resilience, and her readiness to face the final chapters of this story. The city outside was awakening, unaware of the confrontation that had just taken place. Inside, father and daughter stood together, united, prepared to uncover the ultimate truths, confront the lingering shadows, and embrace the future that had been waiting for them all along. The aftermath of the confrontation left the warehouse eerily silent. Dust hung in the air, disturbed only by the distant hum of the city waking outside. Sarah's hands still trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline and anticipation. The fight had confirmed what her father had warned. The shadows of the past were closer than ever. But it also revealed a deeper truth, one that had been hidden even from her. Her father led her to a reinforced cabinet at the back of the room. He retrieved a small weathered box, its surface scratched and faded by decades of handling. "Sarah, inside this box is the truth about our family, the choices your mother and I made, and the events that shaped both our lives. It's not just my story, it's yours too." Sarah's breath caught. She opened the box carefully. Inside were letters, photographs, and documents detailing decades of secrets. Her father spoke softly, guiding her through each piece. "These letters," he explained, "were exchanged between me and people I trusted. Some are allies, some are adversaries. They reveal the reasons I had to disappear, the dangers you were shielded from, and the sacrifices made to protect you." Sarah picked up a photograph of her mother, young and radiant, standing beside a man she didn't recognize. Her father's voice trembled slightly. "That man, he was involved in the events that forced me into hiding. Your mother risked everything to keep you safe, knowing that revealing the truth too early could endanger us all." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "All this time, Mom and you were protecting me. I never knew." Her father nodded. "I know, and I regret the years lost. But every step, every clue I left was meant to prepare you, to ensure that when the time came, you would understand and survive." Then he handed her a final letter, sealed and marked with her name in delicate, familiar handwriting. This is from your mother. She wanted you to have it when you were ready to know the full story." Sarah unfolded the letter. As she read, her emotions cascaded: shock, sorrow, admiration, and a profound sense of love. Her mother had revealed hidden alliances, threats, and the choices made to protect Sarah and ensure her father's eventual return. Every word painted a picture of sacrifice, courage, and the relentless hope that one day Sarah would find the truth. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "Now you understand. The shadows, the dangers, the secrets. They were all part of the path that brought us together. But there is still one final truth you must know, one that will change everything. You think you know about our family." He handed her a small envelope, its contents delicate and cryptic. Sarah's heart raced. Inside was a birth certificate, hers, but not as she had known it. The document revealed an unexpected lineage, a connection to a branch of the family her mother had kept hidden, a secret designed to protect her from enemies who had been hunting the family for generations. Sarah's eyes widened. This means—" Her father nodded solemnly. "It means your life has always been intertwined with legacies you never knew. Every choice, every step, every danger, it was all connected to protecting that legacy, and you." Tears streamed down her face, but she felt a clarity she had never known. The journey, the danger, the revelations, they all led here. She understood now. The past was complex, painful, and fraught with danger, but it had also been shaped by love, protection, and unwavering hope. She looked at her father, voice trembling yet steady. "I understand now, everything, and I forgive the years of absence because now I have you, and I know why it had to be this way." Her father's eyes glistened. "And I have you, Sarah, more than I could have ever hoped for. Together we can move forward, face whatever remains, and finally live without the shadows of the past looming over us." Outside, the city lights flickered against the night sky, serene yet alive. Inside the safe house, a father and daughter sat together. Surrounded by the secrets of generations, they had faced danger, uncovered hidden truths, and revealed the deepest family secrets. And for the first time, they were free to start building a life together, one not dictated by shadows, threats, or lies, but by trust, courage, and love. The first rays of dawn spilled over the city, bathing the streets in a soft golden light. The tension of the past days, the danger, the revelations, the confrontations had finally lifted. Sarah and her father stood side by side in the safe house, surrounded by the remnants of the past, photographs, letters, and the evidence of a life once lived in shadows. "Everything is finally out in the open," Sarah said softly, her hand brushing over the table. "The secrets, the dangers, the lies. It's all gone now." Her father nodded. a faint smile touching his lips. Yes, and now we can finally live without fear. The enemies are neutralized, the threats have been dealt with, and the truth is ours. We've faced everything together, and we've come through stronger. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had feared this day would never come, feared that the shadows of her father's past would forever cloud her life. But now, standing here, she realized that she was no longer defined by the secrets or the dangers. She was defined by her courage, her resilience, and the bond she had forged with the man she had longed to know all her life. Her father handed her the small notebook she had used to track their enemies and the letters she had studied so carefully. "Keep this," he said, "not as a reminder of danger, but as a testament to the strength we found in each other and the life we can now build." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "I will, I promise." They walked out of the safe house together, stepping into the soft morning light. The city was waking, oblivious to the drama and revelations that had unfolded within those walls. But for Sarah, the city felt different now, alive with possibility, free from shadows and full of hope. Her father paused, looking down at her. "This is only the beginning, Sarah. Our past has been unveiled, but the future is ours to create." Sarah smiled, a sense of peace settling in her heart. "Then let's create it together." Hand in hand, they walked through the streets of the city, leaving behind the shadows of the past. The dangers had passed, the secrets had been revealed, and the bond between father and daughter was stronger than ever. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt truly free. She had faced the unknown, uncovered the hidden truths, and emerged stronger, wiser, and unafraid. And now, with her father by her side, she was ready to embrace a life built on trust, courage, and the love that had endured through decades of separation. The journey had been long, filled with peril and revelation, but it had led to this, a new beginning, a family reunited, and a future unshadowed by fear. Together they stepped forward, ready to live fully, to love openly, and to face whatever life might bring, with courage, with hope, and with each other. And that's how life unfolded, full of unexpected twists and quiet victories. Every challenge shaped them, every choice led them here. And though this chapter ends, the journey is far from over. Stay tuned, because every life has another story waiting to be told. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you never miss a real-life story. Share your thoughts in the comments and check out more stories right here.